Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a really nifty CD of music discovered by Leon Botstein and the Orchestra now. Ton, with like an O over it, like that conductor lady in the movie, whatever her name was, Tor or Top or Trope, or I don't even remember. I've already forgotten it, and I never even saw it. Anyway, it's called The Lost Generation. It's on the AVIE label. And it features music by Erich Apostel and Hugo Kauder and Adolf Busch. Adolf Busch, Rudolf Serkin's father-in-law and Peter Serkin's grandpa. So it's really very interesting. These guys all lived roughly the same period. Kauder was 1888 to 1972, and Apostel was 1901 to 1972, and Busch was 1891 to 1952. So where do we begin? All of them were part of that before the First World War before the Second World War, German crew. Some of them, like Apostel, were more Schoenbergian disciples. Kauder, well, they say on the back here, was sort of a Hindemithyan, but he wasn't. He was a tonal composer. He was in the Mahler-Brahms school. He was a Czech composer. He fled the Nazis. He was Jewish. He wrote lots and lots of music, including 5 symphonies, and spent most of his career in the United States. So the styles are very different. Busch's style is just pretty. It's romantic German stuff, basically. And Apostel is a little flakier, but we'll get to that in a moment. Now, all of these works are premiere recordings. All of them are interesting in a way. And I have to say, this is one of those cases where I recommend and enjoyed a disc full of music that I didn't necessarily care for. And that's true of all of these works, actually. But they're interesting. And as a program, the totality is greater than the sum of its parts. Hey there, Mildred. Wait a minute, we got Mildred here. Say hello. Yes, she likes unusual repertoire, as you can see. Anyway, so there's Mildred, but we have to do serious business here. So you'll excuse me. I know we'd rather play with the cat, wouldn't we all? But we have to do this. And it's worth it, you'll see. So, the orchestra now is Botstein's group, and he does, more than any other human being alive, he has uncovered interesting repertoire that's worth hearing. And this is worth hearing. There's no question about that. And it's wonderful that he can do this. So Hugo Kauder's First Symphony was written in the 1920s. It's 40 minutes long. It's a serious symphony. And in the Brahms, Bruckner, Mahler school, I'm not really a fan of it because it strikes me as rather discontinuous in its argumentation. It sort of stops and starts, and not the way Bruckner stops and starts, it just stops and starts. It has interesting moments. The orchestration is lapidary in the sense that, usually you have the strings and then you have the woodwinds, and you have the strings and you have the woodwinds, and the brass make a climax, and there's a cymbal crash. And then, I found it to be kind of awkward. And here's the but. For all of that, it doesn't sound like anyone else. The slow movement, which is the high point of the symphony, the third movement, is gorgeous, with beautiful writing for harp and other things. It's much more fluid and continuous. The final movement is a Passacaglia, for those of you who like that sort of thing. I mean, like the finale of Brahms' Fourth. It's well executed, but somehow you get the sense that it just hasn't quite come together the way he wanted it to. He's got ideas. He's definitely got ideas. But the way that he works with them and the continuity of line, especially in the first couple movements, it just isn't there, at least that I could tell. And, it could be me. But I liked hearing it because there was personality. There's something there. And since he wrote more than 300 works, it would be nice to hear more of these and see if and how he developed, because you get the sense that there's like a voice. There's a voice here. There's somebody with an interesting way of looking at the orchestra and handling his his thematic ideas, even if he's not altogether adept yet. That's my initial impression. It could be, I could be wrong. I could be, if I listen to it a few more times, it'll strike me as a greater work than I think it is. But that's not saying bad things. It's interesting. It's worth discovering. Let's put it that way. So is Hans Erich Apostel's Variations on a Theme by Haydn. 23 minutes of quasi-tonal foolishness. Okay, let's talk talkless here. The theme is the slow movement, which isn't that slow, from the drum roll symphony. Do 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 do, which is in itself the embryonic model for the slow movement of Schubert's great C major symphony, in case you haven't noticed. Yes, it is. Anyway, he gives it to you. Alternating with strings and winds. Haydn presents it entirely for strings initially, because remember, Haydn's movement is also a variation movement, but it's one of those double variations in minor key theme, then major key, and it's the same tune. And anyway, that's Haydn. So this is kind of like that. You know that piece by Klusak, the Czech composer, the Variations on a Theme by Gustav Mahler, which begins with like the beginning of the Mahler Adagietto, and then it becomes this sort of squeak bloop avant-garde thing where you're wondering, like, why did he bother with the Adagietto by Mahler? Well, this is kind of like that. You have the Haydn theme, which is immediately catchy and recognizable, and then it goes off on a bunch of atonal excursions or scurrying thingies that are very, very irritating. And you can sometimes detect bits of the theme. It's not entirely buried or obliterated, and the shape of the theme, the structure of the way the tune works and things, you can sort of hear that it is indeed the basis for the variations. But the problem with music like this, and it's the problem with so much 12-tone music or atonal music, is that there's so much reliance on the one hand, contrapuntal density of line, and on the other hand, dissonance without resolution, that it really doesn't matter whether it's a slow variation or a fast variation. They all kind of sound the same. There isn't enough contrast. The style doesn't allow for enough contrast of rhythm, that contrast of dissonance and resolution that creates the feeling of movement, through time. They just sort of lay there, one next to each other. So you've got like one ugly lump next to another ugly lump next to another ugly lump. But as with the Kauder Symphony, this is a real discovery. And I was very happy to make its acquaintance. So, it's a gem. It's an oddity. But is it like you're going to play a lot of times? I'm not sure. So finally, the Adolf Busch Variations on an Original Theme. 10 minutes long. It was orchestrated by Peter Serkin. It was originally written for piano, 4 hands. Serkin apparently did this just before his death and never lived to hear his arrangement. And it's lovely. It's a lovely tune, and the variations have that variety of movement and rhythm and character that you do not hear in the Apostel work. So they're nicely contrasted with one another, and you can listen to it yourself and decide how it goes. And it's a thoroughly traditional but really attractive piece. So there you have it. 3 interesting works by 3 interesting composers that you've probably never heard of, or if you've heard of them, like Busch, you didn't hear of him as a composer. And well played, very well recorded, brilliantly curated by Leon Botstein, which is always the case with his programs. And so, get some music you may not like and give it a shot. It's interesting. It was enjoyable for that reason. It was a discovery. And I think that's sometimes that's a good thing in and of itself. We don't have to go further than that, do we? So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me, and take care.